Welcome back to the Brief Insight, everyone.
Great to be here.
A few weeks ago, we did a deep dive into South Africa's just energy transition implementation plan.
Hmm.
Today, we turn our focus to Africa's second largest economy, Nigeria.
Fascinating case.
Now, Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer, and its economy is heavily reliant on those crude oil exports.
Right.
They've also got some growing sectors in agriculture and telecommunications. But the big question we're tackling today is this.
Yeah.
Can Nigeria, with its economy so deeply tied to oil,
Yeah.
actually make a successful leap into a low-carbon future?
It's a big question. There are a lot of layers to that.
Absolutely. And we've got two really insightful sources to kind of guide us today.
Okay.
First, we've got the guidebook on Nigeria's energy transition.
Mm-hmm.
It really digs into the country's readiness, the hurdles they're going to face.
Makes sense.
And then we'll also be pulling from excerpts of the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan itself
Right.
to get a sense of their vision for reaching net zero.
Yeah. Their vision and how that's going to play out. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this. The guidebook stresses the importance of reliable data.
Mm.
And it points out that Nigerian officials need way more information on a ton of things.
Mm.
How dependent they are on fossil fuels,
Right.
the potential for renewable energy sources, and even the extent of their mineral reserves.
Oh, wow.
So it's like
Okay.
a whole data overhaul is needed, it seems like.
It's like trying to bake a cake without knowing how much flour you have. You need that solid data. It's the foundation.
Yeah.
You have to be able to make informed decisions.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is the guidebook doesn't just stop at highlighting the need for this data.
Mm-hmm.
It also dives into the importance of making that information transparent
Okay.
to everyone.
Right.
Policymakers, investors, local communities.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to kind of have that clear picture.
Transparency is key. I
Yeah.
mean, it builds trust.
Yeah.
It encourages accountability, and it ensures that the transition is actually going to benefit everybody, not just a select few.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of transparency,
Yeah.
the guidebook takes a hard look at Nigeria's current policies and legal frameworks,
Interesting.
and it points out a real lack of incentives for renewable energy,
Okay.
and even suggests that some existing policies might actually be disincentivizing that move away from fossil fuels.
Interesting. It reminds me of what we've seen in other countries that are further down the line in their own transitions.
Okay.
Like the UK and Canada, for instance.
Yeah.
They've implemented carbon pricing mechanisms.
Okay.
So, essentially putting a price tag on those carbon emissions
Right.
creates a financial incentive for companies to reduce their impact.
So it's like nudging the market almost in a greener direction.
Exactly, yeah, nudging the market. And then you've got the U.S. using tax credits
Oh,
to encourage investment in renewable energy projects.
right.
What's interesting is the guidebook doesn't just talk about these policies generally. It actually provides specific examples,
Oh, okay.
how they could be implemented in Nigeria,
Gotcha.
how they could actually attract investment and then drive tangible change on the ground.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
It's like taking those models and saying, okay, how could this actually look in Nigeria?
Yeah, exactly.
So it seems like getting the policy landscape right is a huge piece of this puzzle.
It is, yeah.
But even with the best policies in place, there's still the massive hurdle of financing this transition.
Right.
And the guidebook is very upfront about the fact that Nigeria faces a very significant funding gap.
That's something that every country grappling with this transition has to confront, right? Where's the money going to come from? It's multi-layered.
Yeah.
And the guidebook breaks it down.
Okay.
They talk about the need for domestic resource mobilization.
Okay.
So basically, how much can the Nigerian government contribute from its own coffers?
Right, because that immediately raises questions about their current economic situation.
I agree. Yeah.
Can they generate enough revenue to even make a significant contribution?
Yeah. And then there's international public finance.
Okay.
So what role can organizations like the World Bank, development banks, and those just energy transition partnerships, or JGTPs, play in bridging the gap?
It makes you realize that this transition isn't just about flipping a switch, right?
No.
It's a massive economic and political undertaking with a lot of moving pieces.
It is, yeah.
And we haven't even touched on the more innovative financing models like green bonds or debt for climate swaps.
Right.
Those are mechanisms that could potentially attract a whole new wave of investment specifically targeted at sustainable projects.
Yeah. A lot of options.
It sounds like Figuring out the financial piece of this transition is almost like putting together a giant, complex puzzle.
It is, but it's a puzzle worth solving.
Yeah,
I mean, the payoff could be huge.
yeah.
A successful transition for a country like Nigeria could have ripple effects throughout the whole continent.
That's huge.
It could pave the way, a cleaner, more sustainable future for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about data, policies, and the financial hurdles.
Yeah.
But what about the actual impacts of this transition?
Mm.
The guidebook is pretty clear that moving away from fossil fuels is going to have a profound effect on Nigeria's economy,
Right.
especially government revenue, job creation, and livelihoods.
That's where the idea of a just transition comes into play, right? How do you ensure that this shift to a low-carbon future doesn't leave people behind?
Right.
Doesn't exacerbate those existing inequalities
Yeah.
and actually creates opportunities for everybody.
That's a big one. So what would a just transition look like in a country like Nigeria?
I mean, you'd have to diversify the economy, right?
Yep.
You'd have to create new opportunities in sectors like renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, ecotourism.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that the benefits of this transition are shared equitably and that the costs aren't borne by those who are already the most marginalized.
Exactly. And it's about bringing communities into that decision-making process. Ensuring their voices are heard and their needs are addressed.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
This transition can't just be some top-down initiative. It has to be a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
That takes into account the unique needs of the different regions and populations within Nigeria.
Absolutely. A just transition requires understanding the local context
Yeah.
and working with communities, not just for them.
Okay, so we've talked about the economic side of things,
Yeah.
but there's also the environmental impact to consider. The guidebook raises a pretty serious concern about the potential for neglecting legacy oil and gas pollution, especially in the Niger Delta region, as the focus shifts towards renewables.
It's a valid concern. It highlights the fact that this transition can't just be about looking forward.
Yeah.
We have to address the damage that's already been done.
Right. It's almost like trying to renovate your house and ignoring a leaky roof.
Right.
You can put in all these fancy new appliances and furniture, but
Right, exactly.
if you don't fix that fundamental problem, you're going to end up with bigger issues down the line.
Absolutely. And beyond cleaning up that past pollution, there's also the question of how is this transition going to impact the future environment?
Right.
How do we make sure that mining for minerals needed for renewable energy technologies, like lithium for batteries, how is that done in a way that minimizes the damage and respects the rights of those local communities?
It's about taking a holistic view of the environmental impact of this transition from start to finish.
Yeah.
We can't just assume that switching to renewables is automatically going to solve all our problems.
No. It's a much more nuanced approach.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another critical aspect of this transition, to social impact. As we shift away from fossil fuels, we have to be mindful of potential job displacement.
Yeah.
Especially in communities that are heavily reliant on that oil and gas industry.
Right. And it's not just about job losses. The guidebook also talks about the potential impact on energy access.
Yes.
And affordability for vulnerable populations. How do we make sure that everyone has access to clean, affordable energy regardless of their income level or where they live?
Those are critical questions. They underscore the need for a just transition that prioritizes social equity and inclusion. It's about designing those policies and programs that provide a safety net for those who might be impacted by the transition, and ensuring that those benefits of clean energy are shared widely.
The guidebook suggests some approaches to mitigating the social impacts, like social safety nets, retraining programs, and policies that guarantee access to clean, affordable energy for everyone. It seems like those are some pretty essential components of a successful transition plan.
They are. They highlight the fact that this transition can't just be about technology and infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's got to be about people.
Absolutely.
It has to be about ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to thrive in a low-carbon future.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges.
Yeah.
The data gaps, the policy reform, the financial hurdles, the potential social, economic, environmental impacts.
A lot of challenges.
But what about solutions? What are some of the key ingredients that the guidebook outlines for designing a truly sustainable energy transition in Nigeria?
That's a great question, and that's where things start to get exciting. The guidebook offers a roadmap,
Okay.
a set of recommendations for how Nigeria can navigate this complex transition and emerge as a leader in the global clean energy economy.
Let's dig into those recommendations. What stands out to you as the most crucial elements?
Well, the first thing they emphasize is a clear strategic vision
Okay.
with specific goals, objectives, and targets. It's like having a blueprint
Mm-hmm.
for where you want to go and how you're going to get there.
So it's not just about saying, we want to transition to clean energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's about outlining exactly what that transition will look like, what the timelines are,
Yeah.
and how they're going to measure progress.
Exactly. It's providing a framework
Yeah.
for decision-making and investment,
Right.
and making sure that everyone involved is working towards the same goal.
And alongside that vision, they also stress the importance of coordination.
Yes.
Because you've got multiple sectors involved here, right?
Right.
Power, transportation, industry, agriculture. They all need to be working together pretty seamlessly.
Like conducting an orchestra,
Yeah.
You need all the different instruments playing in harmony.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So if one section is out of sync, the whole thing falls apart.
Right. It makes me wonder, how is Nigeria going to achieve that level of coordination
Mm-hmm.
across so many sectors, each with their own challenges?
Yeah. The guidebook argues it's essential for success.
Okay.
They recommend establishing a central coordinating body,
Okay.
perhaps within the government, Mm-hmm.
That can oversee the entire transition process, set priorities, resolve conflicts, make sure that all the different pieces are fitting together.
So it's almost like having a conductor for that orchestra we were talking about.
Right.
Someone who can keep everyone on the same page.
And that conductor needs a deep understanding
Mm-hmm.
of the energy sector, the political landscape, the social and economic dynamics.
So we've got the vision, we've got coordination.
Yeah.
What else does the guidebook highlight as being essential?
Transparency and information disclosure. They argue that open access to data is absolutely crucial for building trust, promoting accountability, and making sure that the transition benefits everyone.
Transparency is always important, but it seems especially crucial in a context like this, where there's so much at stake.
It is.
And the potential for corruption and mismanagement is high.
The guidebook emphasizes that transparency needs to be embedded in every aspect of the process.
From the data collection to the allocation of funding to the implementation of projects on the ground.
And it's not just about making information available. It's about making it understandable and accessible to the public.
Right.
It's about creating mechanisms for feedback and accountability so that citizens can hold their leaders responsible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about empowering people
Yeah.
with information so they can participate in shaping their own energy future.
So we've talked about vision, coordination, transparency.
Yeah.
What's the next key ingredient?
Inclusivity and participation.
Okay.
The guidebook argues that meaningful engagement with communities, especially women, youth, and other marginalized groups, is vital. It's about recognizing that the people who are most impacted by the energy transition need to have a voice in shaping it.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay.
We've talked about the potential for job displacement,
Yes.
increased energy costs, potential environmental damage. If those communities aren't part of the decision-making process, those risks are only going to be amplified.
Exactly. It's about making sure the transition doesn't just benefit a select few,
Right.
but creates opportunities and improves the lives of everyone in Nigeria.
And that brings us back to that core question, right?
Yeah.
Can a country like Nigeria, so reliant on oil, actually pull off this ambitious transition to a low-carbon future?
It's a question that only time will answer.
Yeah.
But the guidebook gives us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It outlines a path forward, but it makes it clear that this transition isn't going to be easy.
It's going to require some bold leadership, some innovative thinking, a willingness to challenge the status quo.
And a deep commitment to justice and equity, making sure that the benefits of this transition are shared widely and that no one is left behind.
And that's where the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan itself comes into play, right?
Right.
It lays out the country's vision for achieving net zero emissions by 2060.
Ambitious.
And it outlines some of the specific strategies that they plan to implement to get there.
Let's take a look.
Let's take a closer look at that plan.
Yeah?
And see how it aligns with those recommendations outlined in the guidebook.
Okay.
What are some of the key highlights that jumped out at you?
Well, one of the things that struck me immediately is just the sheer ambition of the plan.
Okay.
Nigeria is aiming for nothing less than a complete transformation of its energy system.
Wow.
A shift away from fossil fuels
Yeah.
towards a future powered by clean, renewable energy.
That's a pretty bold goal,
It is.
especially for a country that's so reliant on that oil revenue.
But it's also a necessary goal if we want to avoid those worst impacts of climate change
Right.
and create a more sustainable future for everyone.
So let's dive into those specifics. How does the plan actually propose to achieve this?
Well, they break it down into 5 key sectors:
Okay.
power, transport, oil and gas, cooking, and industry.
Okay.
And they've got specific strategies for each one. It's a comprehensive plan.
I'm eager to hear more about those strategies. Let's start with the power sector, since that's often seen as like the heart of the energy transition.
Absolutely. The power sector is a great place to start
Okay.
because it really underscores the scale of the transformation that Nigeria is aiming for.
Okay.
Right now, they rely heavily on diesel and petrol generators
Right.
for a large chunk of their electricity generation.
Yeah, which, as we know from other deep dives we've done, are not only polluting, but also contribute significantly to those greenhouse gas emissions we're trying to tackle.
So the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan lays out a pretty interesting approach.
Okay.
They're calling for an initial expansion of gas generation capacity.
Okay.
Essentially, they're looking at gas as a bridge fuel.
I've heard that term before, bridge fuel, is the idea that it's a less polluting alternative while they work on scaling up their renewable energy infrastructure.
That's the gist of it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a recognition that they can't just flip a switch and go 100% renewable overnight.
Right.
They need a reliable source of baseload power to keep the lights on as they build out their renewable energy capacity.
So it's a bit of a balancing act,
It is.
ensuring a stable energy supply while aggressively pursuing a cleaner future.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where the next phase comes in.
Yeah.
A rapid scaling up of renewables-backed electrification.
Okay.
This is where they see the most significant emissions reductions happening.
It sounds like a two-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Stabilize the grid with gas in the short term, and then aggressively integrate renewables like solar, wind, hydro for
Precisely.
the long haul.
And what's really interesting is they're not just focusing on generating clean energy.
Mhm.
They're also thinking about how to electrify other sectors,
Okay.
like transportation and cooking, to further reduce emissions across the board.
It makes you realize how interconnected all these different sectors are, right?
It does.
It's not just about changing how we generate electricity. It's about transforming how we use energy
Right.
in every aspect of our lives.
That's a great observation, yeah. Electrifying the entire economy,
Yeah.
not just the power sector.
Okay, so that's power.
Yep.
What about transportation?
Okay.
I'm curious how the plan addresses emissions from cars, trucks, all the ways people and goods move around.
This is another area where the plan calls for a dramatic shift.
Okay.
They envision a nearly 97% reduction in emissions from the transport sector
Wow.
by 2060.
97% reduction. That's a pretty ambitious target.
It is.
What's the main strategy?
The core of their approach is mass adoption of electric vehicles, EVs.
Okay.
They're banking on the fact that EVs are becoming increasingly affordable, accessible.
But EVs require a whole new infrastructure, right?
Right.
We're talking charging stations,
Yeah.
grid upgrades
Yeah.
to handle the increased demand. Does the plan address those logistical challenges?
It does.
Okay.
The plan acknowledges the need for substantial investments in charging infrastructure,
Oh,
grid modernization.
right.
They're looking at public and private sector funding to make it happen.
It's a reminder that this energy transition isn't just about the technology.
No.
It's about the infrastructure,
Right.
investment, policy.
All of it.
All these different pieces have to align.
Absolutely.
Think
Now,
about it.
this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Let's shift to the oil and gas sector.
Okay.
Considering Nigeria's position as Africa's largest oil producer,
Yeah,
this is where you might expect the most resistance to change.
you would think so.
Right.
But the plan actually acknowledges the need for decarbonization in this sector as well.
Yeah. What I found interesting is that they predict emissions from oil and gas will decrease,
Okay.
primarily due to the global response to climate change.
Okay.
In essence, they're anticipating a decline in global demand for oil and gas, which would lead to lower emissions.
So it's not necessarily about Nigeria drastically slashing its own production, but rather responding to a shifting global market.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
they're not just sitting back and waiting for the market to shift.
Right.
They're also taking steps to reduce things like flaring
Okay.
and fugitive emissions, which are major sources of methane,
Okay.
a potent greenhouse gas.
So they're cleaning up their own act, even as they anticipate this decline
Right.
in global oil demand.
Now, let's talk about something that might seem a bit surprising,
Okay.
the cooking sector.
Okay.
It might not seem like a major contributor to emissions,
Right.
but in Nigeria, it actually is.
I can see that.
Yeah.
A lot of households, especially in rural areas, still rely on traditional biomass, like firewood, charcoal.
Yeah, which contributes to deforestation, air pollution.
Right.
So the plan calls for a rapid replacement of those traditional cooking methods with cleaner alternatives.
Okay.
They specifically mention liquefied petroleum gas, LPG.
While LPG is cleaner than burning wood, it's still a fossil fuel.
It is.
Does the plan address that long term?
It does.
Okay.
They see LPG as a transitional solution.
Okay.
The goal is universal access to clean cooking by 2030,
Gotcha.
which aligns with those sustainable development goals.
Right.
And then post-2030,
Yeah.
they envision a transition to electric cook stoves and biogas,
Okay.
especially in those rural areas.
So it's a phased approach again.
Yeah.
First, get everyone access to clean cooking with LPG, and then gradually transition to even cleaner options.
Exactly.
Okay.
Finally, we have the industry sector.
Okay.
Here, the plan aims for significant emissions reductions, but it also acknowledges the need for continued industrial growth.
How do they reconcile those two seemingly contradictory goals?
They're targeting decarbonization efforts in key industries like cement, ammonia production,
Right.
and they're pushing for a 100% shift to zero-emission fuels for heating processes.
So it's about making existing industries cleaner, more efficient.
Right.
Finding ways to decouple economic growth from those carbon emissions.
That's the key takeaway. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing we don't have to choose between economic development and environmental sustainability.
Okay, so the plan covers a lot of ground, from electrifying the transportation sector to revolutionizing how people cook.
Yeah, a lot.
But all this change, it's bound to have an impact on people's lives.
It is.
Does the plan address those social and economic consequences?
It does.
Okay.
And this is where the concept of a just transition really comes to the forefront. The plan explicitly states its commitment to a transition that is just and equitable.
Okay.
One that benefits all Nigerians, not just the select few.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
But commitments are one thing.
Right.
How does the plan actually propose to ensure that this transition doesn't leave people behind?
They lay out some specific objectives that are pretty ambitious.
Okay.
They're aiming to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty,
Wow.
bring modern energy services to the entire population.
Okay. Manage those anticipated job losses in the oil sector.
Right?
And even promote a fair and just energy transition across the whole of Africa.
Those are some big goals.
They are.
But it's good to see that they're thinking about the social and economic dimensions of this.
Yeah.
And not just focusing on the technological aspects. It's about recognizing that the energy transition isn't just about reducing emissions.
Yeah.
It's about creating a better future for everyone.
It is, yeah.
But all of this poverty reduction, energy access, job creation, a just transition for all of Africa, it's bound to come with a hefty price tag.
It is.
Does the plan address the financial realities of this?
It does.
Okay.
And the numbers are pretty staggering.
Okay.
They estimate it'll cost around $1.9 trillion
Whoa.
to reach net zero by 2060.
$1.9 trillion.
Yes.
That's an almost unimaginable sum of money.
It is.
Where do they expect to find that kind of funding?
It's important to point out that this figure includes spending that was already projected.
So they estimate that around $410 billion
Okay.
of that $1.9 trillion
Right.
represents spending above what they would have normally budgeted.
So it's not like they're starting from scratch.
Right.
A lot of this investment would have been happening anyway.
It's more about redirecting those existing investments
Gotcha.
towards those cleaner technologies, infrastructure.
That makes it seem a little less daunting, but it's still a huge amount of money.
It is a lot.
Do they have a strategy for mobilizing those resources?
They do.
Okay.
The plan emphasizes they're not expecting to fund this entirely on their own.
Okay.
They're seeking international support, both in terms of public funding and private investment.
It sounds like they recognize the need for partnerships, collaboration.
Yeah.
On a global scale. No one country can tackle this alone.
Exactly. They're framing this as an investment opportunity.
Okay.
Highlighting that potential for economic growth and job creation in the clean energy sector.
Right.
They're essentially inviting the world to invest in Nigeria's green future.
Okay, so we've talked about the vision, the cost, the need for international collaboration. But let's get back to those 5 key sectors that the plan focuses on.
Okay.
We've covered power and transportation.
Yeah.
Can you give us a quick overview of how the plan addresses the remaining three? Oil and gas, cooking, and industry.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's start with oil and gas,
Okay.
the sector that's probably most central to Nigeria's current economy.
Right.
As we discussed earlier, the plan acknowledges the need for decarbonization in this sector,
Hmm.
but it takes a more pragmatic approach than you might expect.
Okay.
They're not calling for an immediate shutdown of oil and gas production.
Okay.
Instead, they're focusing on reducing those emissions through measures like
Okay.
improving efficiency,
Right.
reducing flaring, and investing in carbon capture and storage technologies.
So it's about making the existing oil and gas industry cleaner, less polluting,
Right.
while also preparing for that future
Mm-hmm.
where global demand for those fuels is likely to decline.
Okay.
It's a delicate balancing act,
It is.
but it recognizes the realities of Nigeria's current economic dependence on those
sure.
resources.
Yeah.
What about the cooking sector?
Okay.
I'm curious to see how the plan proposes to tackle the challenge of providing clean and affordable cooking solutions
Yeah.
to a population that's still heavily reliant on that traditional biomass.
Well, this is where the plan gets really interesting.
Okay.
They're proposing a multi-pronged approach.
Oh, okay.
First, as we discussed, they want to achieve universal access to LPG by 2030.
Mm-hmm.
They recognize that LPG is a cleaner, more efficient alternative to traditional biomass.
Right.
And it's already widely available in many parts of Nigeria.
So it's a relatively low-hanging fruit,
It is.
a way to make a significant impact
It is.
and improve people's lives in the short term.
Exactly.
But they're not stopping there.
No.
The plan also calls for investments in biogas,
Mm-hmm.
which can be produced from organic waste
All right.
and electric cooking, which would be powered by that increasingly clean electricity grid.
Mm-hmm.
Those are longer-term solutions.
Yeah,
They require more infrastructure development,
they do.
but they offer the potential for truly sustainable cooking solutions.
Right. It's a reminder that this energy transition isn't a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
It requires a diverse portfolio of technologies and approaches tailored to the needs and circumstances of different communities.
Absolutely.
And finally, let's touch on the industry sector,
Okay.
which is often overlooked in these discussions.
Right.
But it's a major contributor to those global emissions.
What are some of the key strategies the plan outlines for decarbonizing that sector?
The plan focuses on improving energy efficiency,
Okay.
which is often the most cost-effective way to reduce emissions.
Right.
They're also promoting the use of cleaner fuels,
Okay.
like natural gas, renewable energy, in industrial processes.
Mhm.
And they're supporting the development of new technologies, like
Okay.
carbon capture and storage. That can help reduce those emissions from heavy industries,
Yeah.
like cement and steel.
It sounds like a comprehensive approach that aims to reduce emissions
It is.
from industry without stifling that economic growth.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing we can have both a thriving industrial sector and a healthy planet.
Yeah, it's about finding those innovative solutions that allow us to achieve both
Absolutely.
economic prosperity and environmental sustainability.
So we've now covered the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan in pretty good detail,
Yeah.
from its ambitious vision
Right.
to its specific strategies for decarbonizing those different sectors of the economy.
We have.
But I keep coming back to this question of feasibility.
Yeah,
Can Nigeria really pull this off?
it's a big question.
They're facing some pretty daunting challenges, right?
Yeah.
Lack of data, the need for policy reform,
Right.
a massive funding gap,
Yeah.
the potential for social and economic disruption. Is this plan just a pipe dream? Or do you think it has a real chance of success?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And honestly, there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that this is not just a plan.
Okay.
It's a vision.
Mm.
It's a statement of intent, a declaration that Nigeria is committed
Right.
to a low-carbon future.
I get that. It's about setting a direction,
It is.
even if the path ahead isn't entirely clear.
Exactly. And I think what makes this plan so compelling is it's not just about reducing those emissions. It's about creating a more just and equitable society.
Right.
It's about lifting people out of poverty, expanding access to clean energy, and ensuring those benefits of the transition are shared.
It's about recognizing that this energy transition isn't just a technological challenge.
You know.
It's a social and an economic one as well.
Precisely. And I think that's what gives this plan its power.
Yeah.
It's a vision of a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their income level or their geographic location.
Okay, so we've delved deep into both the guidebook
Mm-hmm.
and the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan.
We have.
We've explored the challenges, the
Yeah.
opportunities,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
vision for a cleaner, more sustainable future.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up this deep dive,
Mm.
I'm wondering what stands out to you as the most crucial takeaways
Mm-hmm.
for our listener?
Okay.
What are the key insights they should walk away with?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think the most important takeaway is that Nigeria is at a crossroads.
Okay.
The choices they make today will have a profound impact
Hmm.
on their future and on the future of the entire African continent.
Right.
They have the opportunity to become a leader in this global transition
Yeah.
to clean energy, but they face significant challenges.
And it's not just about Nigeria.
No.
The lessons they learn, the successes they achieve, the challenges they overcome will have ripple effects around the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a story everyone should be paying attention to. It feels like we've been on this journey unpacking all the complexities of Nigeria's energy transition. But you've touched on something really important. This isn't just a Nigerian story. It has global implications.
If Nigeria, so dependent on oil, can transition to a low-carbon economy,
Right.
it sends a powerful message to other countries facing similar challenges.
Yeah.
It demonstrates that this kind of transformation is possible even in the most complex circumstances.
So what would success look like in this case? What are the key indicators that this is actually working, not just on paper, but in reality?
Well, I think we need to look at a few things.
Okay.
First and foremost, are emissions actually decreasing?
Right.
Are they on track to meet those targets? But it's not just about reducing emissions.
Right.
We also need to look at whether the transition is creating jobs, improving livelihoods, expanding access to clean energy.
Right. For everyone.
Are we seeing progress on those social and economic fronts?
Use that just transition idea, right?
It is.
It's not just about changing the energy mix. It's about changing lives for the better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think another key indicator of success would be the level of public engagement and support for this transition.
Okay.
Are communities involved? Do they feel like they're being heard?
It's about ensuring that the transition isn't just happening to people, but with them.
Yeah, it's about building a sense of ownership, shared purpose.
And finally, I think we also need to look at that international dimension.
Yes.
Is Nigeria able to attract the investment, the support it needs?
Right.
Are they forming those strong partnerships?
Yeah, sharing lessons learned.
So success isn't just about what happens within Nigeria. It's about their role on that global stage.
Precisely. Nigeria has the potential to be a leader, a model for other developing countries.
As we wrap up,
Yeah.
is there a particular point from either the guidebook or the plan that you think our listeners should really take to heart? What's one thing you want them to remember?
There are so many.
I know. It's hard to choose.
But you know, what keeps resonating with me is that emphasis on inclusivity and participation, the guidebook and the plan, both stress that this transition can't succeed without the active involvement of communities, particularly those most impacted by the shift away from fossil fuels.
It's that idea of a just transition coming full circle.
It is.
It's not just a nice to have.
Right.
It's a necessity.
And it's not just about listening to communities, it's about empowering them
Yeah.
to become active participants,
Yeah.
recognizing they hold valuable knowledge and insights
Right.
that can inform those decisions.
It's a reminder that this energy transition isn't just a technical challenge. It's a social one, political one.
It is. And ultimately, it's about creating a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Yeah.
Powered by clean, affordable, sustainable energy.
I think that's a fantastic note to end on. The idea that this transition isn't just about avoiding those worst impacts of climate change. It's about building a better world. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me. Always learn so much from these conversations.
The pleasure was all mine. And to you, dear listener, I hope this deep dive has sparked some new ideas, left you with a sense of hope and possibility. The challenges are there, but so are the opportunities. And by working together, we can create a future that is both sustainable and just.